Okay, good morning, beloved friends. It's Dr. Jim Bertel coming to you live from my home here in Maumelle, Arkansas. And it's our blessed privilege this morning to have Eric Pratt with us this morning from the Gun Owners Association. Good morning, Gun Owners of America, and good morning, Eric.
Good morning. It's so good to be with you.
Well, thank you, sir. Do you have an email address and a website in case someone wanted to get in touch with you?
Absolutely. In fact, people can go to our website at gunowners.org. That's gunowners.org. And there's contact information there where people can get a hold of us, drop questions, also sign up for free email alerts, as well as sign up for membership so they can get postcards, which are really helpful at putting the heat on legislators.
Excellent. Let's see. Your father, Larry, has been the executive director of Gun Owners of America for over 30 years, and you happen to be the director of communication of GOA. Is that right?
That's correct. That's right. I've been with the organization for about 25 years myself, and it's the only no compromise group. That's a tag that former Representative Ron Paul gave us, and we are. We're based right outside of Washington, D.C., and so we especially focus on getting good laws passed in the Congress and stopping a whole lot of bad stuff from getting enacted.
Yes, okay. But you've answered my next question. I was thinking maybe that you were someplace else in the United States, but you're actually located right outside of Washington, D.C.?
We are. It's maybe not the best place. People often say this isn't the best place to live, but, for us, this is working by the sweat of our brow.
Yes.
Somebody's got to be here to put the heat on these guys, and so that's what we do.
Sir, as a 17-year-old, I moved away from my home in Ohio and moved to Washington, D.C. to go to work with the FBI. As a 17-year-old, I worked for the FBI at the 4th and D Street Southwest, at the Federal Ident building, searching fingerprints.
Wow, that sounds like a very interesting job.
Well, it was for a year, and then I signed a baseball contract and left there. But I lived in Washington, D.C., and at that point in time, I don't know if we were still running trolleys and that kind of stuff or not, but that's what it was when I happened to live there. But I want to go on here for a moment. Is there any connection between GOA and the Second Amendment?
Well, absolutely. That's what Gun Owners of America is dedicated to preserving, is the Second Amendment rights that are protected. Of course, we view them not as rights that were created by a piece of paper, by a Bill of Rights, but these are rights that come from God himself. Look, the motto of our country is "In God We Trust," and our founding fathers argued that the right of self-defense comes from God. Our founding fathers were Christians. You have passages like Exodus 22, verses 2 and 3, and Luke 22:36, where Jesus tells his disciples to get a sword if they didn't have one. And, the view was that God gives us our rights. If he doesn't give us our rights, then what do you have to turn to? Well, you either have the 51% majority giving us rights, or the government giving us rights, or a piece of paper like a Bill of Rights giving us rights. None of those things are a secure basis for the notion of rights. In fact, under either one of those scenarios, it's they're mere privileges. Because the 51% can change their mind. Government can retract whatever they've given. A piece of paper can be changed.
Sure.
So, our rights are mere privileges if they don't come from God, as our Declaration of Independence said, that all men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. And so that is our rallying cry. That is why we are so uncompromising when it comes to defending the Second Amendment.
Well, Eric, let me read the Second Amendment for my listening audience, because quite honestly, I'm going to use a term, and it's painting with a broad brush, but our people in our country have been so dumbed down over the last 100 years that historically, constitutionally, I think there are too many that don't know what it's all about. But the Second Amendment reads, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, with that in mind, that is the Second Amendment. But there's been much debate, Eric, about the interpretation of the Second Amendment because there are several versions of the text of that amendment with capitalization and or punctuation differences. And I don't want to take the time to quote or to read the differences, but when you see three versions of this, one passed by Congress, one ratified by the states, and then another one written by Scribe William Lambert as part of the original handwritten copy of the Bill of Rights, there are three different versions of this. And that causes me to raise a question with you. How have these punctuation and capitalization differences affected the debate that denies me the right to bear arms? Do you have any idea about that?
Yeah, there is differences in punctuation, and I'm aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes right down to it, certainly the agreed text, which you just read, is incontrovertible, and I think the Supreme Court actually got it right. Not that they always do, but in 2008, when they ruled in the Heller decision that this is a fundamental right that belongs to all Americans. They reiterated that it's a right that shall not be infringed, and by the way, that's consistent with the concept of an inalienable right, which is spoken of in the Declaration of Independence. That's very important. Rights can't be infringed or taken away unless we commit some type of crime that would cause us to forfeit our rights. Otherwise, they can't be denied by government, and the Second Amendment specifically makes that clear, that this right cannot be infringed. In fact, the Heller decision, as it's known, from 2008, also goes on to point out that this right is important for resisting tyranny, and that's ultimately what the founding fathers saw the importance of the Second Amendment. But while it's certainly important for that aim, it's also important for even day-to-day things such as what we're seeing in Ferguson, Missouri right now, where there's at least over the past couple of weeks, there have been breakdown in law and order where stores were being looted even while the police had a line established, but they weren't moving forward. They weren't arresting. I heard on the news today only a handful of people have been arrested over the past couple of weeks. And yet when you watch your television set and you see the tremendous destruction that has occurred, you scratch your head and say, only a handful of arrests as people have been breaking into stores, and that's what's caused gun sales to skyrocket in Missouri. The gun store owners say that normally August is a very slow month. People are focused on back-to-school supplies. Well, not this August in the Ferguson area. Their gun sales are through the roof as people are buying shotguns and AR-15s. And by the way, it's the shop owners that are standing out in front of their stores with firearms. It's their stores that are not being looted. And that's very significant. And it's interesting, too, that they've been able to do this, to my knowledge, without a shot being fired. And that's consistent with the fact that in most self-defense cases, it's simply the brandishing of the firearm, which is enough to deter the attack. And so this has been very successful for the shop owners in Ferguson, Missouri, to be able to use their Second Amendment protected rights to defend their stores.
Well, do you know of anyone at all going back to and we'll pursue that again here in just a moment, but going back to this idea of punctuation and capitalization differences regarding the Second Amendment, do you know of any case, any thinking out there, governmental thinking, people who want to remove our firearms from us? Do you know anybody out there that is using either punctuation or capitalization to deny us or to battle against us for those rights?
No, okay. I haven't seen that. Typically, the argument is made that for those who want to restrict rights, that the right to keep and bear arms should be limited to the militia, which is referenced in the first clause. However, here again, I think the Supreme Court got it right when they said, no, it's not limited to the militia. That may have been an additional reason for wanting the right to keep and bear arms because they did feel that a militia composed of the body of the people, not just the National Guard, but everybody, was the best way to defend the country because they were very wary of standing armies in times of peace. They had dealt with that with the British. So typically it's this argument about the militia, but the Supreme Court said no. It's not limited to the militia. It's a fundamental right that every citizen has. And in fact, that's consistent with the idea that every time you see that word or that term, the right of the people, in the Bill of Rights, whether it's in the First Amendment, Second Amendment, or Fourth Amendment, it's always talking about all the people. You know, you can't look at that right of the people and say, well, in the First Amendment it means everybody, but then in the Second Amendment it only means some of the people.
Sure.
No, that's equivocating. You cannot interpret a Constitution that way, having words change their meaning like that.
Yeah.
So again, the Supreme Court got it right, and I think that's been devastating to the other side, as it has resulted in many gun control laws being struck down. In fact, Justice Stephen Breyer, who's a liberal and very anti-gun member of the Supreme Court, saw this coming. When Heller was handed down, he said that this decision will result in the striking down of many gun control laws around the country. And he was very prophetic in that.
Right? Yeah.
Not only has it resulted in D.C.'s law being struck down, but also Chicago and many other places as well.
Well, Eric, what is the purpose of GOA? What do you guys do?
Well, we lobby at the federal level. We are a grassroots lobby, so we consider our strength as coming from our members, and so that's why we especially need, the more members we have, the louder voice we have in Congress. And last year, we won a very decisive victory in killing all the gun control legislation that was coming down the pike. Of course, there was that very tragic shooting in Newtown and at the school. And so the president, not wanting a crisis to go to waste, pounced upon that. And with his allies in the Senate like Harry Reid and Dianne Feinstein, we were facing the battle of our life as the media was telling us and telling all Americans that finally the tide has changed. People want gun control. And we were hearing that over and over again. And even people on our side were thinking, well, we're going to need to compromise and, at least agree to something so we don't get something really, really bad. Now, our attitude is you never compromise with something that is a God-given right. It would be immoral to do so. And so we stood our ground. We mobilized our members, and it was very, very effective. The New York Times, in fact, certainly not one of our allies, but reported during the battle last year that GOA, speaking of Gun Owners of America, that we were successful in freezing senators, particularly Republicans, who have appeared to be on the fence about supporting bills to expand background checks. So there was legislation to expand background checks to include even private sales. So if you were to sell a gun to your neighbor or something like that, it would have to run through, you'd have to go find a dealer and run it through them. And really this was pushing towards universal gun registration. Well, we mobilized, and we really were successful in getting Republicans who were trying to cut deals with the Democrats. We got them to stand their ground and not support the gun control legislation. As a result, we were able to defeat every single piece of gun control, and which, interestingly, the president recently said that his biggest frustration is not getting to play enough golf, is the fact that he has not been able to get gun control legislation enacted, and we're very thankful to our members for doing that. And our ability to get people active through our email alerts, through even our snail mail, where we just deluge offices with postcards. National Public Radio, again, not a big fan of ours, noted last December that they said Gun Owners of America showed with one email alert that it could help flood the phone lines on Capitol Hill days before the Senate vote. so that's what we do. We put the pressure, realizing that these guys need to go back to their home districts to get support to get reelected. And so we found that's a very effective means of killing bad legislation, but also getting support for good legislation.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Are you there?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Oh, yeah. I don't know what happened, but I sort of lost you there for a moment. Let me come back here again. I had indicated to you that my perception of lobbyists is really not good, and I know that it's a skewed thinking, but my concern is that when lobbyists go to Washington, D.C. to lobby for me, I don't want them to go up there and get Washington to do something for me. What I want them to do is to protect my freedoms. Tell us in your terms, as a lobbyist, what are you trying to get something for people, or what are you doing?
Well, we're not the traditional lobbyists, and you're right to be skeptical of lobbyists.
Yes.
There's the old joke of what do you call a dead lobbyist at the bottom of the ocean? A good first start. But we don't go to D.C. to cut deals.
Okay.
We're not here to represent the Congress to our members, which a lot of groups do. They end up agreeing to things that they shouldn't agree,
yes.
and then they explain to their members, why this was a good deal for them. No, we go to Washington to represent the Constitution and our members' views to the congressman. And so that really is the rudder that guides us. It's the reason that Representative Ron Paul said this is the no-compromise gun lobby, because we don't make those kinds of deals. And it's the reason why last year, when we were battling gun control, we would not agree to any compromise whatsoever,
yes.
Much to the frustration of even some of the people on our side of the fence, although they eventually came around, thankfully, to stand with us in opposing all gun control, and that was finally the outcome. We defeated all gun control.
Would it not be so that anyone who is standing for any form of gun control is being anti-U.S. Constitution?
Well, right. If we were to take a stand in, take the background check. That right there was a compromise. We never supported the Brady bill. Some of the other groups here in Washington that are here to defend the Second Amendment, they did support that. They supported it as a compromise, and their reasoning was, well, at least we're not getting something worse like a waiting period.
Yes.
Well, a waiting period is bad. We oppose that too. But a background check is not good. First of all, it doesn't stop bad guys from getting guns. That Newtown shooting, the killer didn't go through a background check. He killed his first victim, stole her guns, and then those were the guns that he used to shoot up the school. Background checks are not going to stop people, and inevitably, 95% of the denials are false positives. No wonder that the Justice Department in any 1 year will only send to jail about 13 people, for trying to buy a gun illegally. That's because most of the cases are people with the wrong name, the kind of thing that keeps people from flying if they're when they're not on the no-fly list. I mean, even the late Senator Ted Kennedy missed several flights because somebody on the no-fly list had the same name as him. And, of course, when you're a senator, you can get that cleared up a lot easier. When you're a gun owner who's being denied, you may end up spending thousands of dollars to be able to get your rights back. It should not be that way. As Americans, we should not have to prove our innocence to the government to exercise God-given rights. It's a failed system. It doesn't work.
In terms of GOA, how many members do you have at this time?
We have 750,000 members and activists. We've got activists on Facebook. We have a very large email list and membership list as well that get our snail mail, which is just as important. Because, even though the emails are good, they are blips on a congressman's computer. It is also effective, and another part of our strategy is deluging offices with postcards, and that's why the more members we have, I say, the louder voice we have in Congress.
Well, you said you've actually got members and activists. Now, does that mean members, even activists, or is that two different groups of people?
Well, no, we have members who are activists. That's why people join Gun Owners of America. I mean, they realize they may not get some of the benefits that they would get through the NRA, like cheaper rates at a gun club or something like that. But when they join GOA, it's because they want the no-compromise, hard-hitting group that's by God's grace, been able to defeat gun control. They want us representing them. So they are activists. But then we also have some who are activists and maybe, in the process of becoming a member.
Okay, I see.
They haven't fully signed up. They haven't contributed, but they do act on our alerts. And, that's how a lot of people come to us, is they get on our email list, which is free, and people can go to our website at gunowners.org and sign up for free email alerts and start receiving our emails and see what we do and how we do it. And then, people say, hey, these are the guys that I really want to stand with. And so then they start supporting us, and so they move from just being an activist then to being a member and activist.
Yes. Who can be a member, Eric? Can anybody be a member?
Absolutely.
Okay, black, white,
come
rich,
one, come all.
Age limit?
No age limit. People have gotten memberships, even lifetime memberships for their grandchildren.
Really?
And there's a place on our website to give gift memberships. People can also sign up for lifetime memberships as well.
Okay. Does it cost anything?
Membership is $20 a year, as we tell people, less than a box of ammunition, so well worth protecting your rights.
Yeah. Well, if I became a member or someone else becomes a member, of what value is that membership in GOA?
Well, if I understand your question, in other words, what does that membership get you? It gets you a voice in Congress, the no compromise voice. But even more than that, we are actively going to enlist you in getting you to contact your representatives. And we make it easy for you. I mean, when I go out and speak places and I run into our members, that's one thing I hear over and over again is, I love you guys because you make it so easy for me to take action. You give me a postcard, or you give me, if they're on the email list, you give me pre-written text, so I don't have to sit down and write things from scratch. And, some people might say, oh, well, a postcard, don't congressional offices know that this is being generated? The thing that we've found is that when we provide people postcards, a lot of them will take that and turn it into their own letter. But again, it's a lot easier if somebody gives you something.
Sure.
So we actually generate more letters, more personal letters, by giving people the postcards. But even if that's all they send in is the postcard, that postcard represents a voter in the district, so it is very significant, and we have seen it pay dividends time and time again in legislative battles that we've been involved in.
Well, when a legislator's office receives that postcard, receives that letter, that phone call, what is it about that that's going to motivate them to give heed to what we are saying? Because what they might do, they might just trash all that. The senator, the rep may not even hear this information. How does that work?
Well, again, to quote the New York Times, the Gun Owners of America has been successful in freezing senators, particularly Republicans, who have appeared to be on the fence about supporting bills to expand background checks. When those Republican senators started hearing from not only their constituents, but constituents who were on their side of the fence. In other words, typically, if you were to look at things politically, gun owners tend to support Republicans because the Democrat platform actually supports all kinds of gun control. I recognize some gun owners also support libertarians and independents, but typically Republicans will look to the gun-owning population for their support. And when they start getting hammered by that gun-owning population, that tells them, we need to be cautious. That's why, another outlet, TPM Magazine, said Democrats blame gun owners of America for gun control setback. That was last April. Because we were mobilizing our members, and while maybe, in a Democrat office, a gun owner may not have as much pull, boy, they have 1,000 times the pull in a Republican office.
Yeah. We know this next question is tongue-in-cheek, and by the way, it's right at 4 seconds till 10 o'clock. Do you need to go right this moment?
No, I don't. So if you want to keep going, that's fine.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I've got a few more questions. This next question is really tongue-in-cheek, but I think that we need to ask it. Should we be pleased that President Obama is, in fact, pro-Second Amendment and he is a member of GOA? I don't know that. Okay.
Unless somebody gives him a gift membership, he's certainly not going to be clamoring for a membership in our organization.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, he has been one of the biggest opponents that we have faced. Although I will tell you, people frequently refer to him, we frequently refer to him as the gun salesman of the decade.
Oh, yeah.
There has been a run on guns, or especially a run on ammunition, and he is the biggest reason. I've been told that there's even been posters of him in gun shops as salesman of the year type of thing. So he has really done the all-out effort to pass gun control restrictions. Following that famous adage of never let a crisis go to waste.
Sure
but by God's grace, he's also had to admit that not getting gun control passed was his biggest frustration in his term in the White House, and we're glad that we could help contribute to that frustration.
Well, Eric, I don't think I've asked you this question. I had it in my mind, the back of my mind. Are you a born again Christian?
I am, indeed. Ever since I was 16 years old.
Oh, really? Yeah. And do you attend a church of your choice?
I do.
Okay. Do you mind tell us where that is?
Well, I attend church in Springfield, Virginia. It's actually the church I became I became a believer while I was attending there, although it was in part through the Young Life Ministry.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And just connections that I had there. Yeah. Fell away a little bit in college, but the Lord brought me back, and I tell you what, I love the job I'm doing, and one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about the Second Amendment is because of my Christian faith. Yeah. And in fact, we have in our fact sheet section of our website, we've got an article that my father penned on the Bible and guns and what the Bible has to say about self-defense and weapons ownership, et cetera, et cetera. Well, and I would add to that, and the curse that gun control is on a nation, and you see that in several places. So I highly encourage people to look that up in our fact sheet section on the gunowners.org website.
Well, you've been involved with the GOA, you said, for 25 years, and your father, I think, has been the director of that for something like 30. It must be a joy in your heart to be able to work with your father in something like this.
Well, it really is, and everybody, I may be biased, but other people tell me he's the best boss they've ever worked for.
Is that right? Mm-hmm.
He is a tremendous, godly man who is, very slow to get angry, very patient with people. Is just a great, great boss, and so he's been a great dad and a great boss, and it really has been a blessing working with him all these years.
Well, people like me and most of my listening audience are just ordinary citizens out here. What can we do to protect our Second Amendment rights?
Well, I mean, that's a big question, and part of it is it's even bigger than the Second Amendment issue. Okay. Love your wife or your husband, raise godly children. I mean, all that is part of it. But when you start talking about Second Amendment in particular, I strongly encourage, listen, you need a group on the front lines defending you. And so I encourage people to sign up with it, because I recognize, you've got your own life. You're going to baseball practices or soccer or whatever you're doing. You're not going to be keeping up with all this that's going on in D.C. And so that's why we're here, to see the threats, to alert people to it, to give it to them, to explain it in a way that they can understand, and then give the opportunity for action, and that's the postcards and the email alerts, et cetera, and we give them the pre-written letter, and that's the thing I think that as I was mentioning earlier, people really, really appreciate is the fact that we do make it so easy for them. Talked to one guy not too long ago who works at one of the car manufacturing plants. He doesn't have time to be following this, and so he loves getting our alerts. And with just a click of the button on his computer or iPad, he can take action, and he's engaging in his citizenship duty. Now, one person acting on their own might, a letter or postcard that they might send might not, even cause a raised eyebrow in a congressional office. But that's the beauty of us being able to organize the deluge effect, where we're getting hundreds or thousands of contacts going into an office. That's what makes the difference. And so, how can people defend their Second Amendment rights? Become a member of Gun Owners of America. The easiest way to do that is on the website at gunowners.org. But people can also check us out on the Facebook as well. We have very informative articles and funny memes and ads and things like that as well.
Yeah. Well, let's suppose for a moment there are naysayers out here that they don't like this idea of owning guns. What if somebody said to you, "Well, Eric, what's the big deal about taking guns out of the hands of citizens?" How would you answer that? What's the big deal?
Well, I would say look at the places where we've done that. Washington, D.C., Chicago. When those two cities were under their gun ban, they were not safer. In fact, both of them were competing for the unenviable title of being the nation's murder capital. But anti-gunners are so committed to their cause. When the Supreme Court struck down the D.C. gun ban in 2008, the leaders in Washington, D.C., from the mayor to the delegate that is in the Congress, Eleanor Holmes Norton, they predicted that with guns now being legal in Washington, D.C., in their mind, this meant that there was going to be even greater murder and mayhem in Washington. And this is what they said. I mean, it's public record. People can Google it, find out what they said. The exact opposite has happened. There are now more guns in the city. Well, there's legal guns now, tens of thousands of people owning legal guns in the city. Their murder rate has dropped to a 40-year low. Same thing happened in Chicago. Chicago's still a pretty violent place. They still make it difficult for gun store. In fact, I think to this day there's still not a gun store in the city. I may be wrong about that. So there's still all kinds of restrictions, but it is legal now to own handguns in the city. Their murder rate, even though it's still higher than most cities, it has dropped from where it was when they had their handgun ban. So I would just say to people that think that, just consider that the places where that view has been in effect are the more dangerous places. But if you're really committed to that, then would you be willing to put a sign out in front of your door that says there are no guns in this home? Would you be willing to do? Are you so committed to your cause that you'd be willing to do that? Because that's in essence what was being done in Washington, D.C. That's in essence what we have done in front of every school. We've put out a sign that says there are no guns here because this is, no weapons allowed. That's the policy. Isn't it interesting that when you go back to 1950, all the mass public shootings have occurred in gun-free zones, except for two. All have occurred in gun-free zones where guns are illegal. So school after school, even places like Fort Hood, you'd think, soldiers have guns. Well, no, they don't, not on their home base. They do when they go out to war, but when they're on their home base, they're locked up. So it is effectively a gun-free zone. And isn't it interesting that these are the places that these shooters pick? They don't go to gun stores. They don't go to gun shows or police stations where there's going to be lots of guns. They find the place where they're going to be the only one with a gun.
Would you recommend that all citizens go out and buy a gun?
we would recommend that. We have never argued for a mandate, but certainly that everybody should have the right to be able to do that. Although, interestingly enough, speaking of mandates, there are a couple of towns that have tried that, Kennesaw, Georgia being one of them. In 1981, basically as an answer to Chicago's handgun ban, said, hey, we're going to take the opposite approach. We're going to mandate guns in the home. If you're religiously opposed, that's fine. Then you don't have to have one. What's interesting is what happened in the aftermath of that. Their home burglary rate, surprise, surprise, dropped through the floor, which is exactly what they wanted. In essence, they put, rather than putting the sign up, as many cities have done and schools have done, saying there are no guns here, they put up a sign in front of every home, technically or effectively, saying there are guns in this home. And that has had a dramatic effect on criminals. In fact, even through criminal interviews with criminals, they've even admitted, you don't mess with Kennesaw.
Well, maybe one final question, and then I'll let you end the program by saying whatever you want to say, because obviously when you do something like this, I might not be smart enough to ask the question you really wanted to answer. So I'll ask a question, let you make the final comment. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay, my last question is something like this. It's probably the most brilliant question that has ever been asked of people like you. And here it is, this brilliant question. Eric, can't we stop killings by removing guns from the hands of citizens?
And I guess people will stop getting fat if we take away spoons, right?
Oh, I see. Okay.
There has been murder long before there were guns. And when Cain killed Abel, God didn't institute rock control. The beauty of the firearm is that it's the great equalizer. And of course, that's a very famous quote. I wish I could have come up with that. But it is. It's the great equalizer. And I would also point out this. While the media loves to focus on the negative aspects of firearms, the fact is guns are being used in this country 16 to 100 times more often to save life than to take life. It's kind of an ironic thing that the president ordered the Centers for Disease Control to study the firearms issue last year. Of course, he was hoping for, to get anti-gun research. Well, they're the ones that came up with that figure. They found that guns were used anywhere from 500,000 to 3 million times a year. So when you factor that every year guns are being used illicitly 30,000 times a year, that means guns are used way more often, 16 to 100 times more often to save life than to take life. So, the sad fact is again, people are usually only treated to the negative aspects, but as soon as a hero does something good with a gun, then people don't talk about it. Just real quickly, 3 weeks ago, there was a mass shooting in Darby, Pennsylvania, which didn't happen. And it didn't happen because a doctor had a concealed firearm on him, and he stopped the bad guy. It was breaking news all around the country while the active shooter was there at the hospital. But as soon as the doctor used his concealed carry firearm to stop the guy, then it's like, well, story's over. It's not a sexy story anymore. And that's the battle that we face with the media, is that the good uses of firearms just aren't talked about usually.
Well, the final comment's yours, sir. What question didn't I ask that you're burning to answer?
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground, and I would just add, on that last point, we were talking about the doctor in Darby, Pennsylvania, just how important it is for us to stay informed. One way to do that is by signing up with Gun Owners of America. Sign up for our free email alerts. Like us on Facebook so you get these stories, because we, even though these may not be discussed in the main media, we're alerting people to what's going on, and that's having an impact, at the water cooler, at work, and places like that. We're giving people the ammunition, not only in basically in talking to their friends and family about the issue, but also in lobbying the Congress. So I think just my final appeal would be, please, check us out at gunowners.org, sign up, become a member, get our email alerts, and like us on Facebook.
Well, liking you on Facebook, is that the same as friending you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'll put that word out on my Facebook page also. And Eric,
I appreciate that.
Yes, sir. And I want to thank you so much for your time. It's been enlightening for us, and I think and confirming for many of our listeners. So God bless you, and let's just keep on keeping on and see if we can't get this country back.
Very good, Jim. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. You're quite welcome, sir. Bye bye now.